Good morning and thank you for joining us. Before we dive into today's session, I want to take a moment to highlight an important tool that we'll be using throughout the webinar, Conferences.io. This program is integrated directly into Zoom and will be used for submitting questions, participating in polls, and completing our evaluation, and also track your CPE credit. If you haven't already done so, please make sure you accept and open the app within your Zoom window. We have people standing by, so if you have any challenges, please put them in the chat and we'll get help to you in need. So upon completion of the presentation, simply click out of the app and let us know if you have any issues from there. So we're going to get started on today's presentation. We're going to talk about mastering cash controls, financial safeguards from the front lines. Once again, this is just the Conferences.io if you haven't accepted yet. And for those of you that don't know me, I'm Kaitlyn Axenfeld. I'm an audit partner here at Dannible McKee. I work in construction, manufacturing, A&E. I also am part of our fraud committee and do employee benefit plan audits. And with me today, we have Austin French.
Yeah, thanks, Kaitlyn. So Austin French, I'm a commercial banking relationship manager with NBT Bank. And I first want to just say thank you to Dannible McKee and Kaitlyn for having me join today and such an important topic. Dannible is such a trusted advisor throughout our footprint. So just thank you. And not only am I looking forward to hopefully bringing some value on how banks look at treasury management tools and liquidity needs, but also learning something from you, Kaitlyn, and the team on how you guys look at it and work with your clients on that side. I'll quickly just share NBT Bank. We're $16 billion in assets in 7 different states, kind of from the Buffalo, New York to Portland, Maine, and Plattsburgh down to Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. But really a heavy focus here in central New York and headquartered right around the corner here in Norwich, New York. And my job at the bank is really to help business owners and customers meet their goals and help to grow their businesses. So happy to be here and thanks again for having me.
So what to expect from today's session? We hope to teach you to recognize the most common control pitfalls and how to avoid them, implementing effective internal controls that deter fraud and errors, strengthening your reconciliation process to catch issues early, understanding how banks assess and support strong cash management practices, and building a framework that enhances transparency, trust, and long-term financial security. So cash controls is really the management and internal control of cash-related policies. For those of you that are familiar, commonly segregation of duties, authorization and approval, physical safeguards, independent reconciliations, prompt deposits, use of pre-numbered documents, limiting access to records and systems, surprise cash accountant audits, and whistleblower incentives are all cash control methods that we'll kind of dive into here today. So we have our first polling question that popped up here. Does your company have cash controls in place? We'll give people a couple of minutes to kind of filter in here and answer the first polling question.
It looks like some results are coming in. Hopefully we get some yeses here.
So far, all yes.
Excellent.
Which is good. Oh, maybe.
Couple more seconds to get the answers in here.
And just a reminder, in order to get CPE credit, the polling options have to be answered. Okay, so here we have our results here. 97% said yes and 3% said maybe. So for those of you maybe, hopefully you'll take something away from this presentation. And for those that you said yes, hopefully we can, maybe provide some insight on making them even better. So common cash control weaknesses that we see, lack of segregation of duties is normally the top one. Really relates to the size of businesses too. Like it's a lot harder for smaller organizations to have that segregation of duties. So we'll kind of dive into that too and ways to mitigate that. Maybe you don't have the numbers, but there's other controls you can have instituted to kind of mitigate that problem. Poor record keeping and reconciliation Are you doing those monthly bank recs? Are you, keeping up with your transactions in your accounting software? And then just inadequate oversight, right? Who's really watching everything with the cash account and the bank, and whose responsibility is that, and who's also taking ownership of that piece. So first, segregation of duties. No single employee should control all parts of a cash transaction. The purpose of having segregation of duties is it reduces the risk of both intentional fraud and unintentional errors, right? So do you design workflows where different people handle the receipt, recording, and reconciliation of cash? If you're the person opening the mail and getting the cash in, are you also recording it and then also doing the month-end bank reconciliation? If you are, there's probably something there that we need to look at, and how do we mitigate that? For the smaller teams, you can implement compensating controls such as close supervisory reviews. We also really say as a best practice for small business owners to make sure that they're looking at their bank accounts, definitely through like apps or online, right? To make sure that nothing unusual is happening within the daily transactions that they're not aware of too. So that's a overall mitigating control that you can implement.
Yeah, I think as part of this too, when thinking about counting cash and making deposits, something that's often overlooked is prompt deposits with a bank. Check fraud is really prevalent. So whether it's cash or check, especially if you're a retail cash intensive business, making those daily deposits and having kind of dual control, at least two individuals involved, but doing that frequently, right? It kind of mitigates some risk. And then also on the check side, check fraud is really prevalent. So making sure you're kind of keeping up to date and doing those more regularly is certainly helpful.
And then record keeping and reconciliations, they're extremely a detective control to have in place, right? Clear records ensure accurate financial statements and audit trails. They can catch errors or fraud early and mitigate any damage caused. Using pre-numbered receipts, checks, deposit slips, and invoices. Bank reconciliations frequently, but definitely monthly. There should be no month that it really goes on past, a week after you get the statement, right? And making sure that that's a priority for your accounting team. Recording transactions as soon as they occur. Don't wait to do a month worth of invoices or deposits at one day. Really keep up with it daily. And then supporting documents, right? So make sure that you have the support underlying, right? Do you have check copies? How do you handle your deposits? Do you have a remote deposit with your bank that you can make the deposits right at your location? So all things to kind of make sure you're doing and keeping track of. And then proper oversight, right? Prevents unauthorized spendings or disbursement of funds. Even strong controls can weaken if they aren't periodically reviewed. We see it all the time, right? A lot of fraud starts out very minimal, right? It might be $10, $20, $50, then it gets up to the hundreds and then the thousands. And before you know it, that escalation occurs. So as soon as you can keep on track of it and make sure that you're asking questions even about the small differences, maybe you have a difference every month in your bank rec. What is that from, right? Like really diving into it, even if it is small, it can open up a bigger problem or identify a bigger problem. Requiring a management approval for refunds, write-offs, or voided transactions. Right here, I have the deposit on site cash, which I kind of mentioned, and make sure the authorization procedures are performed, right? You might have these controls in place, but are you actually following them and reviewing them periodically? If you have staffing changes or employees out for a week, do you let the cash sit there? If that's the person that normally opens your mail, like what happens when they're out? Who handles that? So that's a lot of the oversight piece of it. And then within basic accounting softwares, there's so many controls you can utilize, right? Role-based permissions, who has access to enter and view what, right? Can you restrict access from certain individuals to kind of mitigate some of that segregation of duty piece? Reviewing the audit trails or activity logs, who's entering what? Is it someone entering credits that they shouldn't be? Approval for sensitive transactions. Do you have a dollar threshold that requires certain level of management approval? Strong password policies, regular backups, reconciling frequently. And I know we hit on cash a little bit, but credit cards, all of that stuff should be reconciled in monthly minimum. Restrict vendor and customer changes, that's a big one. Making sure that their approved changes are happening and not just people changing it within your accounting software. And who has access to those, right? Can just anyone in the company or organization log in and change a vendor payment information? And regularly update and patch all software. Updates are annoying when you turn off at the end of the night, but they're definitely necessary and prevent some of the fraud that we see in the workplace.
Yeah, and on this slide too, one of the things that kind of jumped out at me was thinking about, making sure you have the right people accessing the right things, and limiting access to records and systems to the appropriate parties. There's so many cases out there, and we see it all the time of people who probably shouldn't have access to certain systems. There's a famous case that probably a lot of people have heard of with ING, the financial firm that had it was like an $8 million loss from an employee who was integral in setting up their ERP system, but then had accesses that he shouldn't have had, and over time was, year by year, just taking money slowly, and it takes time to catch those things when you're such a large company, but really making sure that the right people have access to the correct systems, and making sure you're continually, as employees come and go, thinking about that is really important.
Yeah, and just periodic review, right? So in small organizations, people change roles all the time. So when there is a role change, is that something you're looking at as you would look at email or anything else changing, or your title changes? Does that mean you need more access or less access? Kind of, that monitoring piece is really critical here. And then we have our next polling question.
Do you have controls in place with your financial institution? Hopefully the answer is yes here.
See. It's kind of coming here. Just a reminder, you have to click for CPE credit, so make sure you're responding to the polls here. Looks like most people are saying yes, and I think this is a big change we've seen over the last, I guess since I've been in accounting or in the workforce, right? Just technology is constantly changing. Services are constantly changing, so making sure that you have that most up-to-date information too. So 100% said yeah.
Excellent.
That's good.
Good. So if we're 100%, I guess we can skip all this. But no, this is talking about how we think about cash controls and liquidity management from the perspective of a financial institution, right? So people sometimes think commercial banking and go directly to the lending arm, but really a lot of what we do is the cash management and liquidity management, and providing products and services around that to not only maximize liquidity, operational efficiency, but also to do so in a safe manner. So as you can see here, efficient use of time and money, one of the keys to success in business. Managing liquidity and operational efficiency is paramount, but doing so in a safe, secure manner is equally as important. Fraud is something that is on the rise continually. So making sure that we're doing so in a safe and secure manner, and providing customers with tools to do that is important. So a couple of the things that I'm going to go over in the next couple of slides. One is information reporting, and really this is in the last 5 or 10 years has become such a key through the mobile banking and desktop banking has really kind of changed the game. So talking about timely reconciliation and greater visibility into your banking, and things like alerts and monitoring. Also, what are alternatives to cash and checks, and thinking about automated payment solutions, which I'm sure a lot of you use. So ACH and other collection tools like remote deposit capture, lockbox, and some merchant service things. But at the end of the day, thinking about it from a fraud protection and risk management angle. So I'll just quickly cover on things like Positive Pay, UPIC, which is a relatively newer tool that we use, and really, from the fraud protection standpoint. I think that's one of the departments in a lot of financial institutions that is growing rapidly, and you see a lot of colleges putting fraud programs in place to prepare students to go work at a lot of these firms because it is so prevalent. And I think as we think about changes in technology and AI, that is just only going to continue. So I'll start on the information reporting side. So timing is really everything when we think about information reporting and understanding what is going on in the banking activities. So mobile banking and desktop banking has really changed the game here. What it provides is greater visibility into banking activities. So now you can quickly download Excel files with your transaction history of like 18 months and view deposited items, including, and Kaitlyn touched on this earlier, including deposit slips, items that are part of that deposit. So really just greater insight into your banking activities and on a much quicker level. Multi-factor authentication, allowing for customer verification. This one is super important and really is not only on the financial institution side. I got a new TV a week ago, and I was downloading all these different apps, and I had about 5 different times I had to do multi-factor authentication. But
don't share that Netflix account.
Yeah, right. Yeah, like Netflix, YouTube TV. But really, it's so important to verify your customer to prevent fraud, and that's something that a lot of mobile banking platforms have done. And then session monitoring and timeouts, really just making sure that there's not idle sessions where someone could come in and kind of take over the session. So on the alert and transaction monitoring side, I think this is one of the best tools to use from an information reporting and really making sure you're keeping up with your bank accounts and banking activities. So you really get real-time account updates. So balance alerts, like if there's a low balance, you could say, oh, is there a transaction that was unauthorized or shouldn't have come in, right? And really what we're doing with alerts and monitoring is looking at trends for any suspicious activity so we can alert you real time. And a lot of financial institutions, this is now so important, and it helps a lot of the business owners like you to make informed decisions. And same on the exception alerts. If there's any checked exception alerts coming through the app, right? Information reporting is a lot more timely, and time is money. And lastly, I think on the mobile banking side, we've seen a lot of fraud with fraudsters basically spoofing financial institutions, emails via phone, calling and pretending to be a 1-800 number, things like that. So secure messaging within like mobile banking platforms is so important because you are communicating with a customer service representative of your financial institution. And then lastly, like the key to information reporting, right, is account reconciliation and making sure that everything is up to date and you're reconciling with your own records. So it really, the mobile banking and information reporting helps to reduce administrative burden and costs, and you can do it a lot quicker, right? Timely reconciliation, and thinking about reconciling payments, generating reports on paid and outstanding checks, and you can do this much quicker now. And then that last one, data interchange solutions. So we use electronic data interchange, which takes data from like incoming ACH transactions, which I'm sure a lot of you are using, and it helps to accelerate that reconciling process. So the key here is to continue to find ways to not only monitor your activity, but also speed up your information reporting, because that can only help in the long run.
Yeah, and I think the alerts are a great tool, especially if they're responded to, right? So it does no good if you have all these alerts and monitoring set up, but you're not actively responding. And just on the bank, even calling you and stuff like that. There's no harm in hanging up, right? And calling the bank directly, reaching out to your relationship manager, making sure that you're connected to the right person, right? I think I had someone call me about my bank, and it was like asking me all these things. And I'm like, wait, I don't feel comfortable with this. So I hung up and I called back the bank. And it was like, actually the right person, but there's no harm in doing those things, right? Just being skeptical and not giving up additional information if you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we'll talk about it a little bit later, but it's that concept of like trusting but verifying and making sure that you're verifying these things because like I said, fraud's on the rise. And as technology continues to evolve and right, you turn on the news, you can't not hear about AI and how it's changing everything, right? So not only is that improving business, but it's also in the hands of people who are, trying to perpetrate bank accounts, fraud, things like that. So, trusting, but also verifying these things are so important. Next is kind of thinking about, okay, cash and checks. What are other ways that banks help in doing more automated payments and collection tools? So, this is thinking about collecting and sending, payables and receivables. And again, the faster you can do that, the better, because you can, more quickly reconcile and you have faster availability of funds. So ACH has become, super popular, used for both payables and receivables. And a lot of times people are using these for, payroll batches, tax payments, paying vendors, things like that. And again, it's speed of sending and receiving funds, really easy paperless reconciliation. And there's cost savers here too as well, and also helps to mitigate check fraud. I'll talk about it a little later, but check fraud is also something that's really prevalent. And so using ACH is important. And there's a lot of fraud protection tools around ACH, which I'll get into a little bit, that help kind of protect these forms of payments. Remote deposit capture is another great way, or another great tool, I should say, to on the collection side. So remote deposit capture is a scanner that are placed in physical locations. And, understanding that for some businesses, this may not make sense, but for others, this makes a lot of sense if you're getting a lot of incoming, check payments, and it saves a lot of time. So it accelerates cash flow. It helps with your working capital management, but it also helps on the reduction of administrative costs, right? You're not paying someone to drive to the bank 5 times a day with checks, right? It's a quick and easy scanning process, and it minimizes the risk of loss, theft, or damage to checks, which happens more than you would think. The other collection tool that's really nice is Lockbox, and a lot of financial institutions use this, right? So it's used if you have a lot of customer payments coming in by check. You use a PO box with the bank, and the bank actually collects those payments for you. And what does this do, right? It enhances your reporting. It's quicker access to funds, and it's something that's outsourced, right? So it's the bank taking care of this for you. So again, reduces administrative costs and reduces in-person deposits and kind of streamlines that cash management. So the last tool that is really used on the cash management, treasury management side is merchant services, and a lot of banks offer this, right? You think about the payable and receivable side, purchasing cards that integrate with expense reporting systems, so you can quickly and timely monitor T&E transactions, helps aid with vendor transactions. Merchant services, a lot of this is robust reporting and card controls while also maintaining the integrity of data security. And that's both really on the payables and receivable side. And on the receivable side, it's point of sale systems. On our side, we partner with Clover on the point of sale side, which really provides great receivable opportunities and end-to-end encryption on the receivable side. So just a few ways that you can look to automate payments, and I'm sure a lot of you use these tools in your day-to-day, but great ways to automate payments and also on the collection side as well. So as mentioned, fraud protection and risk management is really paramount to a lot of what financial institutions are thinking about these days. We all, myself included, right? We're all working hard to make money, so it's important to manage it well but also keep it safe. So as I mentioned, fraud is at an all-time high. So how do we as banks think about supporting our customers on the fraud and risk management side? And I think before I get into positive pay and UPIC, it's a lot of sharing best practices and sharing information as we see different types of fraud coming out, right? There's new methods and tactics every day. So sharing that with customers, and you as business owners sharing that with your peers, right? If you can help to protect a peer or things like that, it's really important. So on the bank side, these are just a couple tools, and we certainly have more, but these are two that I think are really important and really help to mitigate any fraud, loss, or on the risk management side. So positive pay, this is a tool that is used on both the ACH and check side. So ACH positive pay, the customer will ID vendors that are authorized to debit accounts, right? And if there is an unauthorized debitor that comes in, the bank says, "Hey, wait a second," and will contact the customer and see if this is a allowable transaction or not. So this really cuts down on the ACH fraud. And one of the things that I think is great about ACH positive pay is you can set thresholds. So you can set dollar thresholds for some of your vendors. So if you have certain vendors that you want to set kind of a lower limit, and if there's an exception that comes in, you get to actually verify and approve that. So just another safeguard and kind of control that you can put in place on the ACH side. And check positive pay, I think I've said it a couple times now, but check fraud is pretty prevalent. So check positive pay kind of protects accounts from fraudulent or altered checks. So what happens is the customer provides issued checks file, and as checks are presented, the bank compares these details with the check file to make sure that all the information is right. So check number, date, amount, payee, things like that. So just confirming that any checks that are issued are correct and not fraudulent or altered. And so positive pay really, what it does is it automates fraud protection processes, right? It's all a quick, simple process, but you're really putting safeguards around what are allowable transactions. And it eliminates the need to close the account if fraud is perpetrated, right? Because you have that fraud protection on your account. And I don't have to share with all of you, opening new bank accounts can sometimes be a cumbersome and frustrating experience, right? So it eliminates that need if fraud is perpetrated.
Right, and that's a great tool. It doesn't take anything really different from what the organization is doing or what your accounting staff is doing on a regular basis, right? It's working with the tools that are out there in processes that you already have, right? So how do you work best with your financial institution to make sure that that's happening? And I think the other interesting thing is you never need positive pay on every account, right? So you can pick and choose, right? So maybe there is an account that you want it on, like say you have a separate payroll account. We see that a lot, that positive pays there. And are you still giving manual checks to employees? That's a risk, right? If you're doing a lot of ACH, maybe it's makes sense to have those different accounts and work with your financial institution to like make sure you're utilizing the tools that they have out there for the best for your business. Piece of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the second tool that is relatively popular and one of my favorites because it's really kind of straightforward and easy, but makes a lot of sense. So UPIC stands for Universal Payment Identification Code. So many of you, I'm sure, are receiving ACH credits from vendors, things like that. So what UPIC does is it's a system that offers almost a dummy routing and account number. So you provide this fictitious routing and account number to people that are looking to pay you. And what this does is it is preventing you from putting out your actual routing and account number to all of your different vendors. And it protects confidential account information, right? Which is name, routing, and account, and eliminates the need to establish separate accounts for incoming payments. So you can kind of keep it mostly in all one account because you have that dummy routing and account number that you're using. And really the key with both of these, positive pay, UPIC, is peace of mind. As a business owner, the last thing you want to do is be up at night thinking about potential fraud and things like that. And there's a lot of frameworks that you can work with your financial institution to put around your accounts to make sure that everything is safe, secure, and that if and when something does happen as far as the fraud side, right, you're protected and alerted right away. And that's just super important.
Yeah, and I think the aspects of these helps with the continuity, right? So like Austin said, you don't need to open a new bank account. You don't need to deal with a lot of the hassle. If you do have these controls in place and something happens, you don't have to upend business or freeze everything and wait for your new credit card to come in the mail like we used to have to, right? So great tools.
Yeah, and I think before I dive into this, one of the other things I forgot to mention is really thinking about from the liquidity management perspective, right? And kind of turning off of fraud for a second, thinking about options as far as sweep accounts to think about working capital management, like line of credit sweeps to a deposit account, or to try to maximize interest gains, thinking about a DDA to a money market sweep. So thinking about how sweeps can eliminate needs for manual transactions, but also help you to maximize your operational liquidity. Just another tool that a lot of banks offer on the kind of liquidity management side. But back on the fraud side, some of the hot topics in fraud right now, one of them I think I mentioned already is spoofing. So a fraudster basically, calls and says, hey, this is this financial institution. I know I'm talking to Kaitlyn right now. Please confirm your social and things like that. And then it's just looking to gain more and more information, because the more and more information they have, the easier it is, right, to infiltrate into bank accounts. Check fraud. I talked about it, but that whole stealing out of the mail thing, it's real. Alter checks, lost, stolen checks. There's a lot of that still prevalent.
So interesting, because you feel like with the advances in technology that would kind of become a lesser part of all of
Right.
this. But I feel like it's almost like back to basics with some of it, like it's back.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to continue to cycle through. It's just AI and
yeah.
easier to edit images and do all of that stuff. So
Absolutely. Yeah. And another one is business email compromise. And I have an example in a couple slides of a situation where business email compromise happened, and it ended up in a loss for a company. But this is something that we're seeing on the rise as well. And then lastly, there's been scams with some of the the Paycheck Protection Program, which a lot of people participated in, and that a lot of that is public data. So people kind of finding bits and pieces of information, and the more and more they can put together bits and pieces of information, the easier it is, as I said before. So our fraud department, and I'm not going to take any credit for these 9 points of protection, but our fraud department is constantly thinking about different ways, and easy ways really to prevent fraud for your businesses. So one of those ways is thinking about banking PCs and who has kind of access to bank accounts on different devices. Seems simple, right? But the less devices that have access, right, the less risk there is. So trying to have kind of standalone devices that are used for a lot of times just your financial transactions and not browsing the web, email, like the more you can kind of lower that, the better. Dual control, I think this is something super important that you've mentioned quite a bit, Kaitlyn, and thinking about one way on the ACH side, right, is separating who is originating an ACH versus who is authorizing an ACH. So that's just a simple way. But there should be dual control when thinking about cash as well. And so keeping dual control kind of across all of your financial activities is paramount. Daily review sounds simple, right? But reconciling daily the more and more you are reconciling, the quicker and easier it is to find any transactions that shouldn't be there, or don't make sense, right? And reporting them. Phishing is very prevalent as well. I know I have to take trainings all the time on right, spoof emails like, hey, you won $1 million, click this link. It happens more than you think. So being on the lookout and just being alert with that. Fresh passwords. Another thing similar to multi-factor authentication that is sometimes frustrating, but is very important is fresh passwords, right? And doing that every 45 to 60 days. And that ING case I brought up earlier, one of the things that happened there that really resulted in a loss was a couple of the accounting staff were sharing passwords, and that is a huge no, I guess. So, thinking about fresh passwords and not sharing or having a sticky note on your desktop with your password, simple, but really can help prevent fraudulent situations. Online and computer security, making sure that your antivirus and malware things are up to date and constantly, and Kaitlyn talked about it earlier, right? That's something simple that you can do, but can really help. And then the last three are very, basic human level things, but are important. So email safely, try not to send a ton of personal or sensitive data via email. And I know, a lot of places use like secure link portals. That's really great for, working with customers and, vendors using secure portals. And then last two, simple, but trust but verify. And we talked about that earlier, right? You have to have some sort of verification process as you're continually working with, even if it's, a vendor that you've worked with a long time. I'm going to talk about a case in a second, but making sure that you're verifying that people are who they say they are, and keeping just a watchful eye, right? Continuing to monitor daily and raising your hand and coming to your financial institution if there is an issue. So
Yeah, and I think as our IT director says, security is never convenient, right? So making sure that you're balancing that piece of it, and IT was never really, it's kind of separate from accounting for a long time, right? But now everything's like integral with the computers and internet, and just making sure that you have those controls in place and you're utilizing resources that are out there for you. So we come to our next polling question here. When's the last time you read about fraud in the news? We have today, last week, last month, maybe last year.
I feel like with government shutdown and AI, the news is kind of dominated. So we'll see what the answers are. Answers are here.
It's just, there's just an election too, so I feel like everything gets the news cycle. So we're seeing some come in here. Couple more seconds on the poll. It looks like the majority are saying last week, a couple are today. So we're just going to talk about, two interesting cases that kind of, I guess, confirm what we're saying here, right? It's very prevalent. Last week was about half. So.
Wow, those 8%ers maybe last year. I don't know if you got to watch the news a little bit more or what, but
okay.
Yeah.
News isn't always happy these days.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So this was a case of a former Central New York Fire Department treasurer was sent to prison for stealing over $300,000. 17-year treasurer. This is a case that was just actually, I think he was just sentenced last week or the week before, end of the month. So he wrote fire department checks to cash, which he pocketed, deposited checks written to various legitimate vendors into his personal accounts, and deposited checks intended for the department into his own bank account. Attorney General investigated personal purchases and payments, including cryptocurrency transactions, credit card payments, and cash withdrawals with the funds he stole. So he got 1 to 3 years in prison and must pay restitution. The fire department officials have since taken steps to prevent this from happening again. They adopted proper policies and procedures, ensuring that public funds as well as private donations are used appropriately, right? So this is a case where you know, it's tough to see this, right? $300,000 to a fire department is a lot of money. I think they were working on saving up for a new fire truck, right? Um, so proper vigilance of internal controls within the fire department could have prevented this theft. You know, was there oversight? Who was looking at the bank account? If someone's writing checks to cash, is that a legitimate check? Question. All right. So who else is looking at it, right? If you just have a treasurer that's doing everything, what's the segregation of duties and dual approval? Were there any limits in place? You know, anything at any time that could have been flagged by someone else, right? So I think that's another important part, as we say, looking at online transactions and stuff like that and those bank logins. Maybe there's someone else at the organization besides the treasurer that does have access to pull up the bank account, and you're just, maybe you can't write checks, you can't edit, but you just have view access. From there, you could see that, hey, there's a lot of checks going on. What did we buy? Why is this to cash? You know, and just identifying and asking those questions early on. The biggest thing we see in fraud is the dollar loss escalates over the years, right? So it really starts small. So if you pick up that $10, $20 transaction or fraudulent try, you really are preventing probably a bigger fraud over time. Bank statement review. So was anyone else looking at those bank statements? Like if there's transfers or cash or, you know, the checks to cash thing is just, this day and age, I really feel like that's not something that should even occur.
Yeah.
You know, are there ATM withdrawals that shouldn't have been made? Who has an ATM card for your organization, and do you really even need one? And then timely financial statement presentation and review. We see this all the time, right? Like you can make the financial statement look good for so long, but after a period of time, it's very evident that something's amiss, right? It has to go somewhere. And in that sense, you know, the bank statement's obviously key. Like you might have timely financial reporting, your treasurer's in charge of that, but who has that bank statement review? So I know I'm on a couple boards and stuff, and I always am like, yeah, I want to see the bank statement activity as the treasurer of the organization, like just to, you know, a little check, make sure that someone else is looking at it besides just the controller or the accounting manager, whoever's doing the transactions.
Yeah, so this is another interesting case that actually happened, and I've heard of stories similar to these, kind of, you know, all over the place, right? But ACH fraud and business email compromise. So I think I mentioned business email compromise earlier. So this specific example, the controller of a company had a longtime vendor that they worked with. Again, it kind of goes back to that trust but verify that we talked about earlier. So what happened is a perpetrator hacked the email of a longtime vendor of this subject company. The perpetrator then sent an email from the compromised email address, so same email address, right, to the controller of the subject company using the same exact ACH request form that they typically use, with instructions to send to a new bank account. And the nomenclature on the new bank account was super similar, so it wasn't something that was caught. The company processed multiple ACH requests for what they thought was their longtime vendor. They thought they were just doing their normal monthly payment to their vendor. Instead, what they were doing was sending money to a perpetrator and lost out on significant funds. So, you know, what happened here is really, not only did the company lose out on funds, but they also strained a vendor relationship, right? The vendor's expecting these payments. Why aren't they coming? Vendor not knowing that their email was compromised and had multiple cases of this that they had to solve, right? So it goes back to that trust but verify. And you know, one of the things that I think is important here, and what can be taken from this, as the slide says, segregation of duties and dual approval. It goes back to making sure you have someone who is verifying these transactions that are being originated, and making sure that everything looks good. Simple, but the callback, right? And not only relying on a simple email request, but actually picking up the phone and calling Kaitlyn and saying, hey, is this actually you, right? A very simple thing, but really could have eliminated this sort of situation here. Again, timely bank statement review and confirmation is very important. And I think we talked about, there's a lot of tools that help improve that timely review and reconciliation. And then again, just management oversight and making sure that as business owners, you have oversight into how all these tasks are divided and what controls are around them.
Yeah, and I think that trust but verify is like the key, right? So you might have who has access to change those vendor files, and are they trained enough to question it, right? Are they aware that this is a risk area and this is something that happens? So if it does happen and maybe that's like, hey, I got this email, do you think this is right or not? Like we see it all the time, like, hey, go buy 10 gift cards, and it's like, no, please don't buy the 10 gift cards, right? Come to me, ask. I'll never ask you to buy gift cards, right? So just, that trust but verify, picking up the phone, making sure you're actually having an authentic conversation with the person on the other line. Is key really there. And probably can prevent a lot from happening. So next here, and we'll have a handout at the end of this too with a slide deck on just a basic cash management checklist here. Easy to use, go through, just, are you doing these things? Is this something you might need to implement? And we can talk about the IT security and all those controls there, but I think a lot of it boils down to just like the fundamentals, right? Like, how do you handle cash? How do you handle the receipts and disbursements? Do you have narratives or manuals out there that are, this is the process that it's happening, and is this okay or not okay, right? And I think a lot of times we come out, we talk about internal controls with our clients that we're doing audits for and stuff like that. And sometimes the procedure on paper isn't really what's happening day to day. And I think that opens up for, some further analysis and discussion. Like if we want to change the policy or the procedure, that's fine, but are we covered in these areas still? And cash is king. So you definitely have to make sure you have good controls in that area. So I'll just go through a couple here, like cash handling procedures. Who's the employee handling the cash? Is it in a secure area? Or do you have two people present when cash is counted? I think a lot of times now we've gotten away from cash transactions, right? So maybe there's less emphasis on that handling procedures. Who gets the cash receipt report daily? Is that going to the owner? Is that going to the president or CEO? Who's reviewing that cash receipts and disbursements for the day? We talked about the electronic transfer ACH piece. Another area that we see a lot of potential start of fraud is in the petty cash area, right? So what's the limit that you have petty cash for? Do you require receipts? Who can replenish petty cash? Who's making those checks out to cash and then cashing it? Who's going to the bank and has the ability to get cash out? Reconciling monthly, right, at a minimum for bank recs. Who else is reviewing that bank account, right? Who has access to view and see the transactions that are occurring? It's very easy to open up your checking account and see the canceled checks, right? So are you taking that next step? Like, okay, maybe I don't know the dollar amount or whatever, but every now and then I go in and I click on a check and I see the image. Like, is it made out to a right vendor? Is it going there? Are your vendors calling and asking why you haven't paid them, right? Maybe in that case, it would have been picked up.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that kind of thing. Segregation of duties. We can hit on that forever. Do you have periodic rotations or require vacations of people, right? Who is the structure to fill in when someone's out, and is that adequate in that moment? Physical security. Are things locked up in a drawer, safe? Who has access, right, to that cash piece? And kind of, I like the idea of a separate bank login PC, kind of, right? That'd be great. No internet browsing or anything on there, right? Do you have security cameras in your facilities or cash areas? And oversight and monitoring, definitely make sure someone's reviewing it. Whose job is it to review that? Who's randomly counting cash or looking at the deposits? Do you look at the voids and refund reports or discount patterns, right? How else do you hide cash leaving your business in those three areas? And supervisor approval, like setting thresholds and limits is huge, right? Even on your bank account transactions, like, hey, low balance, what's a low balance? What's typical for your organization? Is that a threshold to hit, or your account alerts? If I get a check over 10 grand, I want to see who it's for, right? Those are all things that you can implement too. And most importantly, documentation training. Are your employees trained? Do they know what to look out for? Are they aware of what's out there in the world today? And is there a periodic change or implementation, like the phishing emails, for example, they're changing every day. AI is going to change this area probably even more, right? You might not even be able to trust a phone call in a couple of years, who knows? So it's just, making sure that you have the tools in place to protect your organization the best you can.
Yeah, and I think, on this, the key here is understanding that each organization has different needs, right? And some, you think about a retail business, very cash intensive, right? But others may be collecting, I think about construction industry, right? Maybe collecting a lot of payments or sending out via ACH. So just thinking about this checklist and okay, what can really apply and how can I strengthen that and continue to look at that going forward and work with my accounting firm or work with my financial institution to kind of strengthen the controls around that is really the key.
So here we have our last last slide, or last polling question, sorry. Would you like to hear about some quick wins you can implement now? You have no option.
I like this.
I'll give it a couple minutes. Everyone's going to say yes, though,
Yeah,
right?
that's great. Yeah. Yeah, and I think if you can take anything away, is take a couple quick wins and go back to your teams and say, hey, how can we think about this? How can we implement this going forward or just look at our procedures. So sometimes refreshing that is really important, the policies and procedures. Wow, a lot of yeses.
Everyone say yes.
Yeah, beautiful.
Here, right there. So some quick wins you can do, implement a daily cash log, review signatory access and limits, schedule a consultation with your bank representative or accountant. And I think as things change, like the banks are constantly innovating and adding new features and new things. So making sure, like I said, that it's structured for the best of your business, right? They're really there to help you and be an asset to your business, right? We talked about some of the cash management piece of it, but that's a huge factor that we look at too, right? Are you utilizing your cash to your most benefit? And are those controls in place where they need to be? Consider conducting a surprise cash count. Do you have a lot of cash? Is that something to look at? When's the last time petty cash has been reconciled? Reviewing bank statements online daily. At least one person in the organization that's not writing checks, cashing checks, dealing with the cash, right? And regular training and sharing of best practices. Coming to, CEs like this will just help you be aware of what's out there, reading the news, seeing what's happening to other organizations, because it's daily, right, that these things are happening. So just being aware of what's going on in the industry and out there too. Any questions? I think that I don't know if we have any from them. Good.
We had somebody say positive, they didn't sign up for positive pay and it seemed to be imposed on them.
I'm sorry, what?
They did not sign up for positive pay, but it seemed to be imposed on them.
Oh, okay, so the organization or the financial institution is basically setting the control that you must have positive pay.
Yeah, and that's, I think, from a financial institution perspective, right? We would love that every business owner signs up for positive pay, right? Because it is such a great safeguard. However, I would say in that case you can have a consultation with whoever your banker is or your financial institution and think about if that's something you would like to remove or add. But right, we obviously from my perspective love to see business owners who do have that because it is such a great fraud safeguard.
Yeah, and I do think there's a lot of different types of accounts, lots of organizations in that financial space too. So if where you are isn't servicing you in the way your business needs, there's opportunity, right? There's a lot of different banks have different features, different things. So just making sure you're having those conversations, right? If I don't want ACH positive pay, is there the type of account you're in that's causing that? Is it the bank's policy that any payroll that's paid via ACH needs to be in that type of account?
Yep.
Just having those conversations and utilizing that piece. And then I think, what are exception alerts?
I think what are exception alerts? I believe that's probably in regards to, you know, I talked about it, I think in the mobile banking, section. So, exception wise, it would be like, hey, if there's a check exception, you know, something looks altered or you can't read the amounts or things like that. You know, what's happening is alerts are getting pushed out through, the mobile banking, platforms, which help, you know, in timeliness, right? And clearing any exceptions, from the financial institution to make sure that you're getting your money quicker. And I think that's the key.
I think there's one other one about multiple states or handling cash in multiple states. Yeah, so the question is. Oh, it was a client check and we weren't allowed to cash the check even though it was from the same bank as we have. Yeah, I think it's just working with your relationship managers
Yeah.
too, right? Like, did you elevate that through the banking system? Is there someone that could have helped maybe mitigate that process? Was there something that, you know, maybe the upload form was missing something for it to get blocked via the ACH blocker, right? I think, like I said, fraud is never prevention is never convenient, or, you know, the controls and that kind of thing. So I think from the bank side, they definitely try to provide everyone with the best protection possible in those ACH features.
Yeah, and I think there's cases, right, on both sides where, there's going to be situations where maybe it is a legitimate transaction that is flagged, right? And those are frustrating. But on the flip side of that, you know, if you get a transaction, if you're not signed up for some of those services and you get a transaction, and you're not covered, right? And you don't have positive pay and that comes through, you know, I think the key is there's kind of weighing the, you know, the importance of those two things, and then working with your financial institution, right? If it's a service that you have, an issue with, working with your local bank rep, or on the commercial side, your relationship manager, to kind of work through those things and find a best solution for both the financial institution and you as the customers is the key.
Was there another? What's the best way to monitor payroll vendor for tax payments? I'm not really sure what that's referring to. I'm assuming this means like when you have tax payments as part of your payroll. And you know, we harp on this a lot. So if you were outsourcing, payroll, a big push, even when we looked at employee benefit audits this summer, was, are you reviewing and receiving SOC reports for your service providers and service organizations? So sometimes you do rely on controls from other organizations, right? What are they expecting you to have in place at your organization? Did they get a clean opinion on that SOC report? So I would say anything to do with the payroll. And if it's a different type of question, please feel free to send me an email after. We can definitely sort through or get you a response on that piece. But you know, are you reviewing your service providers too? Are you reviewing your payroll provider and getting their SOC reports and making sure that they have controls in place at their organization, that everything's happening the way it should? So kind of leave that as that. And if you have, like I said, a further clarification, please feel free to email me after and I'll get back to you there.
We currently have positive pay for ACH. How do we get for checks? Is the fee increased for adding? Great question. So, you know, I think that varies from financial institution to financial institution, right? And some financial institutions have some of these platforms, some don't, right? So it really, I think the key is, you know, contacting your relationship manager, or, you know, local bank representative and saying, hey, I heard about this, you know, check positive pay. You know, what is the cost? Is there an additional cost? And you know, generally the answer is added service, yes, right? But you know, going over that with your relationship manager or financial institution, and understanding not only, you know, what are the costs, things like that, but also what are the benefits, right? And there's a lot of benefits to adding services like that. So really it comes down to, you know, contacting your relationship manager or your bank to have that discussion. And, you know, the other thing, as Kaitlyn said too, if there's questions like this, or or anything else that wasn't mentioned, or you have kind of further questions about some of these controls, happy to answer any questions with the email that was provided. So
Yeah, and I think that there's always a cost benefit analysis, right, with some of this stuff.
absolutely.
You know, there is a cost for some of it, even security controls, all that stuff, software. But what's the benefit and is it worth it to the organization? And that's a very case by case basis, and everyone's risk comfort is slightly
Yeah.
different,
Yep.
right? So with that, even like if your organization isn't writing a lot of checks on a monthly or weekly basis, is that the best use, right? Maybe
Right.
we do one here and there and we just monitor internally when we do write those checks.
Yep.
So definitely a cost benefit analysis with some of the security and controls piece. And then we're gonna wrap it up. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And like Austin said, please feel free to reach out if there's any other questions. And at the end of the session, there is an evaluation, so your feedback is greatly appreciated. And once we're all done here, you can simply exit out of the conference IO app. Thank you.
Thank you.